Azrael first noticed something strange one quiet morning while brushing his teeth. He had been staring into the mirror, lost in thought, when a flicker of movement caught his eye. His reflection, though identical, seemed off, its gaze a shade darker, its smile sharper, almost predatory. He squinted, leaning closer to the glass, but the image stared back with perfect mimicry. Brushing it off as a trick of the light or sleep-deprived imagination, he rinsed his mouth and headed out, convincing himself it was nothing. But the oddities didn't stop there. Over the next few days, Azrael began to catch fleeting glimpses of his reflection, behaving strangely. Sometimes, the movements would lag just slightly behind his own, as though the mirrored version needed an extra moment to react. Other times, he could have sworn the reflection smirked when his own face remained neutral. These were tiny inconsistencies, so subtle that he started questioning his own perception. Maybe it was the result of too many late nights, too much caffeine, or the stress of work piling up. Azrael shared his concerns with a few friends, half laughing to keep it light, but their responses left him feeling more isolated. "You need more sleep," one suggested. "Stress can do weird things," another said, though their smiles faltered when they saw the genuine unease in his expression. Even his mother, a deeply spiritual woman, urged him to pray and find peace in his faith. But the reassurance didn't stick. Something deep inside him whispered that this wasn't a simple case of stress or an overactive imagination. Something was wrong. The encounters with his reflection grew more intense, more deliberate. What began as fleeting moments of unease turned into outright confrontations. One evening, as he washed his hands in the bathroom sink, his reflection moved when he did not. Azrael froze, his heart pounding as the mirrored version tilted its head slightly, staring back with a twisted grin for what felt like an eternity. The reflection held his gaze before mirroring him perfectly once more. Azrael's prayers became more fervent after that night. He began waking early to recite verses, lighting candles in his room, and keeping a rosary nearby at all times. If this was some sort of demonic presence, he reasoned, his faith would be his shield. But the more he prayed, the worse things became. His body began to betray him. A dull, burning ache spread through his muscles. His skin grew pale and sallow, and he started finding strange bruises and scratches on his body when he woke. The pain wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, like his prayers were igniting something dark within him. The reflection, however, grew bolder. It didn't just wait for him in the bathroom mirror anymore. It appeared in windows, polished tables, even the faint gleam of his phone screen. And it wasn't just mimicking him, it was mocking him, its distorted grin flashing in every reflective surface. Azrael became consumed by the fear that whatever this was, it wasn't just in the mirror, it was inside him. He began to unravel. At work, his colleagues noticed his short temper and erratic behavior. At home, he lashed out at his family over the smallest things, surprising even himself with the intensity of his anger. He felt like a stranger in his own body, his emotions no longer entirely his own. At night, his dreams were feverish and relentless, filled with shadows that whispered in his voice and reflections that clawed at the edges of his mind. Desperate for answers, Azrael turned to his faith with even greater intensity. He fasted, hoping that his sacrifice would cleanse him, but the hunger only seemed to deepen his torment. He read scripture aloud until his voice grew hoarse, yet the mocking grin of his reflection only widened. It wasn't until one particularly dark night that he reached his breaking point. He was alone in his apartment, sitting before the large mirror in his bedroom. The candles around him flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the walls. Azrael stared into his own reflection, his lips moving in silent prayer. The reflection stared back, its grin gone, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Finally, Azrael broke. His voice cracked as he cried out, "Why? Why is this happening to me? Why have you abandoned me?" Tears streamed down his face as he slammed his fists against the floor, his despair echoing in the empty room. For the first time in weeks, the reflection remained still, offering no smirk, no mocking gesture. It simply stared back, blank and expressionless. The silence was deafening. Exhausted, Azrael stumbled into bed, feeling a hollow emptiness in his chest. The warmth of his faith, once so strong, now felt like a distant memory. He fell asleep quickly, his body worn from weeks of torment. But that night, something shifted. As Azrael drifted into sleep, he felt a faint presence lingering at the edges of his consciousness. In his dreams, he stood in a dark, endless void, his reflection looming before him. It didn't move or speak, but its eyes burned with a cruel intelligence. When he woke, the room was bathed in an unnatural stillness. The mirror across the room seemed darker, its surface no longer reflecting the faint morning light. Azrael avoided the mirror that morning, but the unease followed him throughout the day. At work, he caught glimpses of his reflection in computer screens and windows, and each time it seemed to be watching him, waiting. That evening, as he passed by the mirror in his bedroom, he stopped. Something drew him to it, a pull he couldn't resist. He stood before the glass, staring at his own tired face. For a long moment, everything seemed normal. Then, as he turned to leave, he saw it, the faintest flicker of a shadow behind his eyes, a hint of that twisted grin creeping into the corners of his mouth. Azrael froze. He knew then that the reflection wasn't gone. It was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. In his despair, in his loss of faith, he had opened a door he couldn't close. The demon wasn't in the mirror anymore. It was inside him, nestled deep within his soul, waiting for the perfect moment to take control.
Love what you see? Then subscribe us and hit the bell icon to keep up to date, and make sure you like the video. If you have a real horror story that you want to share, please email it to us. Our email is as follows: official@gmail.com.